read something else, and it continues to change. Oh, sorry, thanks, Sam. So this is the title. And even on Friday in the PhD program for 804, 803, 803 and 804, but in 803 on Friday, when I delivered this, I explained to my colleagues that the word for bringing Indigenous knowledge to other forms of knowledge needs to be respectful and needs to represent a equal relationship. So even the way we use words, we have to exercise a measure of equality, a measure of respectfulness. And so rather than, so it's a little bit of a struggle. And one of the articles that I read about this word, to integrate, to include, those are the first two. There's a couple of others, and they are okay, but they can be there's even a small amount of questionability about them. Does that knowledge, when it is incorporated with us as scientists, and we are all scientists, in my classes, I say to my first year students, who's an academic? And very first day of school, everybody's sitting there. Okay, who's a scientist? Well, remember when Lori asked you to sign that form? And you registered for your courses? Yes, that's when you became an academic, and that's when you became a scientist. Oh, so that's us as scientists. So how do we respectfully, positively, and in a good way bring Indigenous forms of knowledge together and information with what we do as scientists and our scientific knowledge? And so one of the terms that to explain in a respectful way of combining is holding space. So that in our space that we develop for our scientific endeavor or our scientific work, we also hold space at the same time for our Indigenous work. And so one of my big recommendations for today, starting at the beginning and all the way at the end, is when you're doing and when we are doing our scientific work, don't forget, it's not finished until we also hold space and establish our Indigenous work that we can all do. We can all do Indigenous work because we all can see and read and learn Indigenous knowledge. So that's the explanation behind the title change. Sorry, Anne, I was going to send an email, but that's the explanation. So holding space for Indigenous knowledge, perspectives for sustainability, and because it was a countdown to Green Day next week, which is Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday. And so lots of fanfare. I teased Anne in our class that she wrote Jemima and I in, two of her colleagues from the PhD to do this. You're welcome, Anne. But in any case, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm glad to be able to share some of the information that I've been working on and that I'm still working on. So how do we click? Just the arrows?
Yeah, arrow. That's good.
So I have, oh, it's the left, right arrow, isn't it?
Click.
Here's a big click. Every machine is different.
Oh, there's these arrows here.
Here we go. Okay. So in the introduction, so I speak my language somewhat. I'm also a Nisga'a language student. I have class today at 3 and homework. So to begin, Slaadi simgigedam klekle tene gant tsetixti. Kamayam what giscast ni whoops nista hookants will not ask giswidwada will witqui. We did some whelps, Tim Sian, dip gun, as get Zalask, get some Kalem, get gat, get Hatla, that's Lach Galams. Galaxy Act new at UNBC. I honor and recognize the chiefs of Clay Tene and their territory. I am Gamayam. I'm in the Kilauea tribe and I come from the house of Nistahook and group of Kisputwada houses. These are extremely large Tsimshian houses at Kitsalis, Kitsimkalem, Hartley Bay, Kitkatla, and Port Simpson. Lori and I, that's my wife, and our daughters Starnita and Caitlin are all UNBC alumni. In fact, Lori and I are the parents to the youngest ever UNBC grad. That was Caitlin last year. So the previous youngest ever UNBC grad was Starnita the year before. But because Caitlin's birthday was later in the year, she became the youngest ever, so she beat her sister. So it's kind of that younger sister, older sister thing. But in any case, we're so happy to be part of UNBC, and we've been working with UNBC since 1994. So for quite a long time. I thank you all for being here and for your good work, all of you. So so the agenda is working. So we're going to start with the video, A Northern Path. This video was shot by a provincial ministry for tourism. So I guess it's the Ministry of Tourism. Several years ago, 2015, I think, was the time that they collected the footage and produced the video. So we're going to start with that, then I'll unpack it a little bit. I have some information about sustainability from Indigenous identity. So I'll explain what that means. Sustainability from edicts, rules, and laws. Those would be our Indigenous edicts, rules, and laws. Some literature on sustainability that I've uncovered so far. It's a really long list and there's a lot to go through yet. But when we do this a year from now, we're doing this again, right, Anne?
Yeah.
When we do this a year from now, there'll be an updated version. One of the important points I had some of my colleagues in our PhD program ask me about Indigenous knowledge and where to begin. And so I thought it should be important to share these because these inform a lot of the work that I've done and that I continue to do both as a PhD student, but also as an instructor and as an administrator for our Niska University College. And it's these four. So UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples articles. There are 46 or 47 articles that cover a range of topics and issues. If you haven't read them, please read them. Same for Truth and Reconciliation Commission. My mother, Dr. Nice, who's the CEO for Wopahosk, she's a member of the Senate and the Board of Governors for UNBC as well. She was one of the editors for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report. And that report ends with calls to action. And again, if you haven't read them, please read them. Because there are many different topics and issues for us as Indigenous in Canada that are directly applicable to the work that we do as academics. It's just work that we do and just lives that we live in Canada. So it's extremely helpful information to read those. The third one is the recommendations from the inquiry into the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls issue, and same as the other two. Those recommendations also point to some directions for us to consider and follow to assist, to encourage, to lift up, to recognize, and to honor those that were lost on those lists. Some of us have family members on those lists. A lot of us have family members on the lists. I'm part of my family was involved with that. And the fourth one are treaties. And if you haven't read treaties, you can find them just like the other three. And again, very informative. The more recent ones, like the treaty from my dad's nation. And I should also say, my mom is Tsimshian, and because we are matriarchal societies, we follow our mothers. So that's why I identify as Tsimshian first. But my father is Niska. and I was raised in the Nass Valley. And so my language that I speak is Nisga'a rather than Tsimshian, only because that's the language I know from having been raised in the Nass Valley. So every time I visit my mom's family or my family on my mom's side, they always tell me my language sounds funny. It's really close language, but it does sound funny compared to the other. So they're just teasing me. But in any case, so treaties, if you haven't read them, please do so as well, because they also have very helpful information that can support our research, support our studies, support our work as academics, as scientists in whichever discipline that we are in. And so very informative. One really important one, well, they're all important, but one, the Robinson-Huron Treaty last year in 2023 was settled. We think mostly settled, but they went back to court. In the Robinson-Huron Treaty, one of the articles or one of the clauses in that treaty was that the First Nation was to have a share in the economic development of their territory. That's what the language said. That was the understanding. As the people came together and the country of Canada and the province of Ontario were established, as things went along, the First Nations there were to be included. They were not. And so after a really long reset, also known as court case, and then negotiation, they updated the treaty. And last year reached a settlement of $10 billion in the economic benefits that were foregone by them not having been at the table, by them not having been part of the decision making. So Robinson-Huron, you'll find it on Google, but that is a direct result of a treaty. And so that's why treaties, and there are several that cover Canada. The Nisga'a Treaty, which I was involved in for more than 2 decades. I started when I was 12. Yeah, that's a really old joke. But for more than 2 decades, we worked on the Nisga'a Treaty. I was an administrator for one of the Nisga'a villages, and my father, Harry Nye Sr., was the resources negotiator. So we had 3 negotiators for the treaty. The chief negotiator was my grandfather, Joe Gosnell, who we'll hear from in a minute. Second negotiator was Edmund Wright. He was responsible for institutions under the agreement, so things like finance and justice and legislation. And for resources, fish, land, forestry, minerals, water, that was my father. He was the resources negotiator. So when you see the Nisga'a Treaty, you'll see my name only because I have the same name as my dad. Treaties are very important. So if you haven't read these, I'm starting here and I shared with my colleagues on Friday, please read them because they can inform and help the development of our work as academics in holding space for Indigenous knowledge. So next we're going to do the video, which means we exit. Thanks, Anne.
No problem.
So it's a short video, 4 minutes.
To talk about, allow me to talk about spiritual beliefs for a while. Today we have many places that are called in our language Spinachna. Spinachna is a supernatural being. And there are many places on our land where these beings live. Dwelling places of supernatural beings. Our stories tell us that when each one of you were born, there's another person born with you. And our people call this person awesome. Theologians know this person as the soul of man. So when this mortal body dies, what happens to this other person? Story tells us that there's a great city in the sky where people go after life ends here on earth. They call this place Samlacha. You know it as heaven. And there's a pathway leading to this great city that one has to travel to get there.
And did everyone on Zoom see that?
Yeah.
Yes?
Did you see that on Zoom? Zoom people? Yes, okay,
Yes,
great,
right.
perfect.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Oh. Let me stop that.
Our slides. Thank you, Matt. So a northern path. So the speaker was my grandmother's younger brother, my late grandmother's younger brother on my dad's side. So this is my dad's uncle, Wathlin Samagat Fleck. Wathlin is a term used for past. Samagat Fleck today is my father. And he inherited after my grandfather passed in 2019. So Dr. Joseph Arthur Gosnell, this is a picture of him on his gillnetter trawler at Port Edward. During our fishing time, we were a fishing family since forever. He was a member of the Order of Canada. He was also a member of the Order of BC. He was also Chancellor of UNBC. And I put UNBC, yes, I did. So he was Chancellor. I'm not sure which Chancellor he was, fourth, maybe, fifth, sixth. Trying to remember. Iona was first, I know that. So in any case, he was Chancellor here for UNBC. So to unpack some of the information that he included in the video, and the video again was shot, that's where I come from. Those are the landscapes, those are the ecosystems that are in the Nass Valley. So from mountaintops that are covered in ice and snow, all the way to valley bottoms and wetlands, all the ecological zones in between, that's where I come from. And so that's what was captured in the video. So to unpack some of the information, and I didn't do this on Friday for my colleagues, so this is a little bit new for them, but he begins with Spinach. And Spinach, he references or explains that those are the dwelling places of supernatural beings. Some of the information that we have in our history, Nisga'a history, tells about the interaction between humans and supernatural beings. This July, we are doing Geography 298, which is the CX volcano. The information for Geography 298 will begin with a story that speaks about the supernatural that assisted the humans, the Nisga'a, at the time of the volcanic eruption. So there's quite a detailed story about that. And that's what that course will begin with this, and that's this coming July. So thanks to everyone in geography and NRES for helping us put that together. So Spinaknok, the dwelling places of supernatural beings. There are several locations across Nisga'a lands where these beings lived, as he said. And there is specific history to specific places. There is one place that talks about the birth of regalia. And our history is so old that there are birthplaces of these historic events. My great-grandfather, his father, Eli Gosnell, carved a totem pole for the nation when our elementary and secondary school was opened in 1976. Our Nisga'a school district is entering its 50th year, and when he carved the pole, he put a figure at the top of the pole, and it's a man, and the man is holding a rainbow. And I always thought that that man was the trickster in Nisga'a culture and Nisga'a history. We have a trickster, he's called Kaimsa. And I always thought it was Kaimsa. And then my aunt gave me a copy of the story that goes with the pole. I'd never seen it. I knew it was a pole, I knew what the figures were and what they represented. I thought, at least I thought I did. And then I read his story, or my great-grandfather's story, and that isn't Kaimsa. And even in my classes, when I ask my students, who's the man on top of the totem pole up at Ness, Nisga'a Elementary Secondary School? And everybody goes, Kaimsa. No, it isn't. It's the man that first saw a rainbow. And my great-grandfather said, our nation is so old, our people have been here so long that we were here before there were rainbows in the sky. That's a long time. So the dwelling places of supernatural beings, it's an extremely long history, and we have some very detailed information about those specific places. Even where the man first saw the rainbow, that's at the top of one of our mountains. Similarly, there are places that represent that specific history in specific places. Our nation is like that. I'm sure other nations are similarly organized. I'm sure other nations have their specific history of their territory and what it means for them. We know parts of this and what it means for us. Otsin is the second term that I wanted to pull out of the video, and that is the soul or spirit. So when our mortal bodies die, what happens to our soul and our spirit? Any human culture on the planet has some sort of definition of this. No matter where we go, we can learn about what those perspectives are. What the perspectives are in Europe, what the perspectives are in South America, what the perspectives are in Australia. Everyone has a perspective of what the Otsin is. Perspective is going to be an important word for my presentation today because there are so many. And one of the features of Indigenous knowledge is to learn about that other perspective, investigate that other perspective, and see what it can do for the work that we do. I haven't told, one of my committee members is Dr. Joe Shea. I haven't told him yet, but we have 27 words for snow in Nisga'a. If you don't know Dr. Shea is the snow specialist for UNBC. I'm gonna blow his mind. And then the third term that I wanted to pull out is Tsimlacha, in heaven. Tsim means in, Lacha means heaven, the creator's domain. in our society, there are three levels that our history tells us. The creator's domain first, where the creator is the domain of the supernatural that go between the creator's domain and the natural domain, or the third domain, which is the human domain. So those are the three levels: creator, supernatural, and natural. Our history documents our interaction with the creator, our interaction with the supernatural interaction with the creator, the supernatural interactions with the natural or the humans. That's how our information and our history is built. In any of our stories, we can see those interactions. Again, this is not unique to the Nisga'a Nation or the Tsimshian Nation. I'm sure other Indigenous nations have similar organization. And the last part that I want to pull out for the video, our history tells us, meaning that we know this information, we have knowledge of this information because of our history. And our history meaning our time in this place. And our time in this place has been so long. So that's a Northern Path, and you'll find it on Vimeo. And this is Dr. Grassel. Thank you, Anne. Switch to the next one. So my next slide is beginning more of the information. So I thought I would do something a little different than what I presented to my colleagues in the program, which is, of course, focused on all of our research. And everybody's doing amazing things. So when we're done, UNBC is going to have a little library of 14 amazing theses from all of us that are in our cohort, and we'll get there eventually. Our schedules are a little busy, but in any case, so a little bit different for my research right now. So sustainability from Indigenous identity. Where does identity come from? When I first talked to Dr. Wheat, and Roger's with us, good morning, Roger, about the PhD, and he asked me, what will you do? And I said, well, part of the work that I've done as an instructor, and I've been an instructor since 1997 for UNBC and WWN. And the first course that I taught was cultural fisheries. I still teach that. It's FNST 311, or 310, sorry. It's salmon. I do too. 311 is the Olympic course, which I'm actually doing right now. And in the research behind teaching that course, everything starts with identity, because that's where the nation starts. So in our case, in the Nisga'a case, in the beginning, we have a creation story. We have a set of creation stories. There isn't just one. The Bible is just one creation story. One of the interesting things in the Bible from one of the articles that I read was, in that creation story, light and dark are created on the first day. In the book of Genesis, we can read that, and the Bible tells us light and dark are created on the first day, except the sun, the moon, are not created until day 4. So it's still a conundrum for all of us. Okay, wait. Light and dark are day 1, but sun and moon don't show up until day 4, 3 days later, according to the story. Wow. That's what it says.
Minecraft was supposed
I guess. Thank you, Zara. So in our creation story, that's where we begin. In our creation stories, our elders tell us the first teachers are animals. It's the animals, according to our histories, that teach the humans about the land. And in that story of the totem pole that I mentioned a few minutes ago that my great-grandfather carved at the high school, he put a figure of the bear. And the reason he put a figure of the bear is because of the story that says The bear is responsible for showing the humans what to eat. Arriving at a place not knowing what to eat, what's poisonous, what's not poisonous, what's going to make you sick, what's not going to make you sick. In the history, it's the bear that shows the humans these are the ones safe to eat. These are the medicines to use. The bear's the first teacher, or one of the first teachers. Similarly, birds are explained as also delivering information and being the first teachers. That's what our history say. And so Nisga'a Origins, when you take our courses at Wapahawsk, we begin with that first volume. We are super lucky. In the 1970s, and I told this to Roger, he said, what will you use for the base of your information? I said, in the 1970s, our tribal council, Nisga'a Tribal Council, collected information from elders at that time. And then there are hundreds of hours of interviews that were documented and written down. Most of the information was delivered in Nisga'a. We haven't analyzed it to a degree or in a detailed fashion yet, but in 1995, WWN published a series of volumes. There are 6. The first of the volumes is called Nisga'a Origins. That's the creation stories. And we can see the words from the elders. The volumes begin and we see the list of elders. We see their quotes. We see their names, the names that they hold. One of the things that's interesting about teaching in the Valley and teaching to Nisga'a undergrads and grads is that Nisga'a students will come into the class and they'll see their house names. They'll see their family members in the volumes that wrote this or had this information written down. It's amazing. They'll come in and go, wow, I didn't know. And so Nisga'a Origins is the first of those 6 volumes. Volume 2 talks about Nisga'a culture. Volume 3 talks about Nisga'a society. Volume 4 talks about lands and resources. Volume 5 is a map. It's a map that shows the different place names across different places across Nisga'a lands. And volume 6 is I think it's a set of recordings. I might have 5 and 6 reverse, but those 6 volumes is the compilation of that information. We haven't yet gone back to the tape to see if there can be more information. I'm sure there could be. So that's where Nisga'a Origins begins. That's where sustainability then begins. From creation stories to us. In our feasts, I'm one of the hosts for my house and one of the speakers for my house. And I say to my younger cousins and my brothers and my sisters, what does it mean to be Tsimshian? What does it really mean? If we reflect on our identity, to say that we are Killarwood, to say that this is our house, to say that this is our place, what does that really mean? And that can be for all of us. What does it really mean for our identity? And we have some clue. Our families tell us what our history is, and what our history was, and it's the same for us. So Skokdam's alliance with the first teachers, our history talks about those lessons like that. One I shared is the lessons from the bears. In the Iroquois Confederacy, the Six Nations, I don't know if I'm saying their name right, but Rotten-Sioni is the name of their nation. They have a set of creation stories as well, and there are others. I didn't write them all down, but it's a long list. But in theirs, they call it, in one writer's description, he says, this is Brian Miracle, and he says, he calls it the moment of creation. And then he just describes the moment of creation. The earth is created, the creator is there, and the first human created is a woman. in their creation story. In the Nisga'a creation story, several humans arrive at once. In the Haida creation story, it's a clan on the north side of Haida Gwaii. Lori, my wife, is Haida. It's actually right near her family territory. And in their creation story, the humans come out of a clam shell. There's an amazing sculpture at UBC's Museum of Anthropology of Bill Reed's Raven and First Men. That's what that is. So in this one from the Six Nations, they say moment of creation, or at least Miracle says and describes the moment of creation. And it's the woman is the first human that's created. You're welcome, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Feminism starts right away. Jimmy is our feminist specialist. So, and the first question comes from her. In Miracle's description, he says, when she speaks, the language she uses is their language. So there's a gift of language right away. The first question is, who are you? She asks the creator. And the creator answers, I'm the one who made you. Her second question is, who am I? There's the identity. Who are we? That's the identity question. And there are several excellent references in Miracle's account of the moment of creation for his nation that describes that. It's incredible. Talks about good and evil, talks about dark and light, talks about food and medicine, talks about poisons, and talks about Turtle Island, which I'll get to in a couple minutes. So from our origin stories and from our creation stories are the gifts. And almost every one of the creation stories talks about these gifts. Talks about these things as gifts. The first one is the gift of land. I've called it the first gift. The land, the territory, where we originate. It doesn't say unceded land. That's a thing with me. You're welcome. Whenever I bump into unceded land, I give this lesson. Because the lesson is the first gift wasn't, here's your unceded land. No, here is your land. Oh, right. Unceded comes way later. So we should reference the authentic gift. The authentic gift, the true gift, the gift is land. In our word, in this it's tzetziks. That's land. The second gift is life. Bendadils is the Nisga'a term for life. We are given life. Second gift. And the third gift, Elgin, our language. Each of us has our language. No matter where we are on the planet, we have those gifts. We have the gifts of our land, gifts of our lives and people, the gifts of our languages. Those are the gifts. We can almost stop about sustainability right here. And I was even thinking, I was going to say that, and I'm saying it now, that sustainability then means honoring these gifts. And when I was putting this together and I did this slide and I was thinking at the end of it, I could just almost stop right here. Because to be respectful to the gifts is to be sustainable, to act sustainably. When we Google sustainability, what comes up? FedEx has sustainability. One of the articles tells little jokes about that. But for us, sustainability starts there. Those are given as gifts. You are given a gift, which means you have a responsibility back. That's the solution to sustainability. Our behavior to recognize the gifts that we were given. So that's the bigger introductions. I'm not stopping there. But I had thought about, and then one of the points, and this was from Anne's question on Friday, she asked me about it. And Ali Reza asked me a couple weeks ago too. The first learned behavior that we learn as humans is generosity, because we're given these gifts. That's the first behavior modeled for us by the Creator to us is generosity. And so that's our first behavior. Whenever my younger nephews and nieces graduate and they ask me to speak, I ask them in front of everybody, what was the first word that you learned? Can anybody think of the first word that they learned?
Yes.
Can we remember what the first word was? Don't say swear words. Mom or dad. One of the first words in kindergarten is look. Look.
See.
And so to see. And so the first behaviors, first actions are really important for us to recognize, for us to know, for us to see. And so first learned behavior in this and coming out of these is that we have been given gifts, and so it's generosity. One of the principles, rules, and laws, edicts that we follow is to share. In one of the introductions from one of the elders, they say, it's only right that I share this knowledge with you, to tell you everything I know. It's the case of parents with their children. The job as parents, I'm a parent, is to teach the child everything that they need to know. And in one of the elders' words, she says, everything they need to know, everything they need to know to live a clean, happy, and meaningful life. That's what the responsibility is for parenting. And there's lots of other examples. So thanks, Ed. These photos are from our nation collection. So in my regular day job, my desk job at WWM, this is some of the published work that we have in our collection, our archive. Gary Fagan was an amazing photographer for our nation beginning in the 1990s. He passed away a couple years ago, but he left with us photo albums and photo albums, huge archive of our territory and much of our history. And so that's where those photos come from. That one photo at the top is one of the 4 sacred mountains that exist on Nisga'a lands. And there's a lot of history there. And a Chilkat blanket. This Chilkat blanket, from our history, is the first regalia. The first regalia was a Chilkat blanket, was the Chilkat weave. This blanket, if you don't know, does anybody know about Chilkat blankets? So Chilkat blankets are woven. This is mountain goat wool with cedar bark and created in that design. So with dyes, yellow, it's usually yellow, blue, and white and black is the design for the Chilkat. That's the first regalia, according to the history that we have about the first regalia. So that's what that is. So that's a Nisga'a, and I think this one is a bird. So they're abstract, it's abstract presentations. I have one. Mine's not woven. The ones that we have, my dad has one as well, and we'll see. Oh, there was a photo for Dr. Gosnell. The ones that we have are painted forms of these, and so they come in different crests. So there's a bear, there's a wolf. Mine's a killer whale. I think this one is a raven. So in any case, that's a little bit about the photos. So within the origin histories, there are many lessons for daily living. And when we go through the information in the volumes, we can see all those lessons and what they mean. To be tidy, to be clean, to be productive. I said to my mother once, our old people must have been really good at grief management. For those of you that have suffered traumatic loss in your families, we lost, my sister Allison. Allison was a master's grad from UNBC several years ago. And going through the protocol, we have a protocol that the nation follows when a death happens. And in that protocol, the first speakers to address the bereaved family are chiefs. The leadership steps forward first. And they have a series of responsibilities during the bereavement period. Right now, our nation is in a bereavement period for the loss of our Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. Brian Mulroney was Prime Minister when the Nisga'a Treaty talks began during his time. I have a picture of my dad with Mulroney in Ottawa when those talks began. In the mourning period, though, that protocol is initiated by the chiefs, and they say very specific things. And one of the first ones when the loss happens is to take care in your grieving, meaning you are going to grieve. You are entering a moment of grief that will be somewhat extended, but take care in your grieving. Don't lose sight of what you need to be focused on: your health, your little ones if you have little ones, your partners if you have partners, your house, your car, your studies. Those continue. Take care in your grieving. The meaning behind that is to continue with your work, remain productive, even amongst the weight of the grief. Then it develops, a protocol moves from there. Next, to address the deceased person. And when we address the deceased person, we address their otzen, their soul. And it's the chiefs. Only the chiefs say this. When I said this to my wife's Haida uncles, her uncle came up to me, and he's a chief. And he said, I need to know more. And I said, in our protocol, it's so long established, and the words that are used during those times are hundreds of years old. You may find another video of Dr. Gosnell, and he's explaining this. The words that you're hearing are not, this is not the first time. It's not even in the first time in my lifetime, he says. How old is this protocol? It goes way back. Because it documents that history, because it tells us what the experience was. So that's why I said to my mom, we must have been really good at grief management. So many times, and for those of you that are studying grief or have studied or read about it, people can get lost there. In our protocol, we know this, that people can get lost there. And so it's our chiefs that step forward and say, I'm here to encourage you and to lift you up and to hold you up. In the protocol of return, the family that has suffered the loss after a period of 1 year holds a second feast, and it's to raise the gravestone. That's what we do now. In ancient times, my grandmother said it was raising totems. Totems are stories. Those are the figures on totems that tell a story. In my family totem, the first figure is a mountain goat with a single horn, like a unicorn. And all of our families have similar representations of our interactions with animals. That's what totems are. Totems represent those interactions. What does the bear say? And that, I told you what the bear said. And the different other figures. That's what those totems represent. In one of the classes in the MBA, maybe it was OB, organizational behavior. Thank you, business program. Low man on the totem pole. That's not what it means. is what I said to, might have been Rick Tallman, he's retired now. He was awesome. And I said, it's the totem, that's not what it means. It is the story. And the story from the family. That's what the crests represent. We're told that's another part of the histories is in daily living, those important moments are documented by crests. There's a reason why a mountain goat with a single horn is my family crest. It's because of an interaction of my ancestor in my family that I can document myself back to that had that interaction. And so now we have it as a crest from that interaction that took place. And say every other family, my father's family, same thing. His is a beaver. He also has a white whale. White whale. I asked my grandmother, you mean beluga? She said, maybe. Her name, the matriarch name for my dad's house. So we have chief and matriarch. Those are the two leading hosts for each house. My grandmother was the matriarch. Her name was the Princess White Whale. That was the name. And so I asked her, she said, maybe. That might be those long periods of glaciation and where the Arctic was way down here. One of the articles I read yesterday said, when Indigenous people suffered the population decline after contact, climate change occurred. According to the article. The loss of people in the Americas caused climate to change as contact occurred. That's what the article said. Maybe for those of you studying weather, you can go back into the records and see what do those old records say. Does it say that? Maybe it does. According to this article, it did. And it was cooling. That was the result. The climate cooled at that time. Now we have climate warming. In any case, many lessons like that, and when we go through the volumes and go through our histories, those are the details that we pull out, just like I unpacked the video from Dr. Gosnell, unpacking what those meanings are. That's what those are. So lessons come from our history. They're established by those social institutions, like I mentioned, in the case of our protocol for grief. And we follow in the Nisga'a Nation, and it's similar, my grandmother said, my grandmother was Nisga'a, but her father was like me. She said, my dad was like you, except reversed. She said, my father was Nisga'a on his mom's side, Tsimshian on his father's side. Nisga'a, when they say the word Tsimshian, they say Tsimshian, it's short, it's quick. In Tsimshian, on my mother's nation, we say it longer, Tsimshian, 2 A's, it's longer. But those laws, and there's a set of 10, the first one is respect. The law of Kulkasa'ant. To run afoul of this law means to run afoul of all the others. To be disrespectful means you're offside. To think with any disrespect, you're offside. One of the first ones is respect for gifts, like I mentioned. And these are the social order. Again, they're not new. Thousands of years old is this organization. They also established Lipwilla law, we say in this, or our ways of living, how we are to live. I mentioned in the protocol, to be productive, to take care. Those are words of comfort. They are also words of direction. And we all have those people in our lives when they say something to us right now, we pay attention. There is always somebody in our lives right now we will pay attention to what they say, whether it's a parent or a grandparent or sibling or even child. Right now we will pay attention. That's what that is. That's what that information is. Kill sly Iljuis. I say kill sly, he wouldn't say, if he was here, he wouldn't say Bill slide. This is the late master carver, Bill Reed. This is a quote from Bill, which is amazing. And it says, in ancient times, our people surrounded themselves with what to them was the essence of life, what today we call art. So we think about these artwork. We say artwork. He says we call it art. We do call it art. How much of it is around us? Even at UNBC, we have a lot of it, and it's amazing and it's beautiful. And in many other parts of the world, there is also different types of art. That's what he says was the essence of life. So to imagine what the application is, what the meaning is behind these depictions, behind these designs, behind this art, represents the people, represents those meanings of our identity, meanings of identity, also the history of the family. That's what the art represents. The totems represent those stories. And they're amazing. Museums are full. We have a Nisga'a museum in the Nass Valley, and I invite all of you to visit it sometime. And other museums, which you may have already visited in Vancouver and Ottawa and Toronto and other places, you can see them online even. There's one I shared with my PhD colleagues that at the museum in Ottawa, there is a fishing boat. You'll see a picture of a fishing boat here on one of the slides in a minute. It's a fishing boat owned by my mom and dad. They donated it to the museum in Ottawa, and you can see it there. So thank you. Thanks, Annie. Literature, so some of the literature on, and this is developing for me in my research, but it also speaks to sustainability, all of it, and there's a really long list of slides, and Anne's gonna have a copy of and if any of you have any questions or you want to see any of the references, I'll be happy to share them all with you. You can get in touch with them and Olga, and they can track me down, hey Harry, we can get you fixed up, but the literature on sustainability, and it's long, and it's growing. For the PhD, we have exams coming up. And that's why we're drinking so much coffee right now. Because we all have sets of readings from Annie and everybody else. And we're busy on that. And so my list is going to grow. One of the things that's amazing from the list that, and from Annie, thank you, Annie, and Ken, thank you, Ken. For in my case, they're on my committee as long as Joe, Dr. Shea, and Dr. Fraser, Tina Fraser. She's my committee member as well. Those readings that they're giving us for our exams are amazing information. I don't know if my colleagues are finding the same. Are you finding the same in your lists of readings? That is amazing information that you haven't seen, that you didn't know about?
Yep.
It's all new? Yes, yes. So Zara, Jamima, and Anne are in my class. And it is. And I recently did a talk for UBC. Dr. Andrea Reed is Nisga'a. She is a fish specialist and teaches at UBC. She brought a class to the Nass Valley last month, and I spoke to them a couple times. I met with them on Zoom once and then in person last month. And she presented to me a book. I didn't even list it on here. The name of the book is Pollution is Colonialism, written by an Indigenous academic. It's amazing information in there. And these are similar, super helpful information. There's the volumes. You only get the volumes if you take courses. So yes, we have the volumes. Yes, we publish them, but you don't get them until you take courses. So you're welcome. And we have several UNBCs. They actually print them downstairs. That's where they print them. So when we have to put it in order, they print the volumes for us downstairs. But that's that list of volumes, which I mentioned already. Those are those interviews that were conducted with elders in the 1970s. Again, it's super amazing. Lots to think about, lots to learn in that information. Secret Burke's Sacred Ecology, for those of you that haven't read it yet, and you are in natural resources and environmental studies, isn't this required reading? According to Dr. Booth, it is. It is for Harry. So but it's one that's been around for a while and a really good collection. One of the stories that he tells in the beginning of that book is he does research as I think as a master student. So for those of you that are master students and you're going out into the field, and we all do because we're all master students, he said he was doing research in Northern Ontario and the elders said, yes, you're going to do research on fisheries. Yes, come. It's kind of like Zara going to West Moab. She's going to be there pretty soon. And the elders say to Mr. Burks, yes, come. Come and see and learn about fish. So he goes, except when he gets there, they're all hunting. Oh, so they really asked him to be there to help pack the caribou. I've held that teaching but really working moment from elders many times. But one of the interesting things that he learns in that is from hunting is the elders, when they're butchering the first caribou, there's a bit of a ceremony. And they will pay particular attention to the back fat of the caribou and the stomach fat, because the elders say in that nation, when they look at that fat, it tells them what is happening in the ecosystem. If it's thicker, if it's thinner, what's happening in the ecosystem? That's one of the signals. So they're very interested when it's time to go hunting, and it's not all year. There are specific seasons, then there's that information available from the landscape. In this case, from a caribou. That's just one animal. I told this to Dr. Otter, Ken, who's our 804 prof. He said he had a really interesting exchange in Fort St. James. And he was doing research there on birds because Ken is the birder. Thank you, Ken. What's that bird? He tells me every time. Anyway, he was doing research there and he's researching chickadees. How big are chickadees? Very big, maybe the size of a tennis ball. They're not very big. And one of the Indigenous people there, his name was Stephen. Stephen says to Ken, why? You can't eat them. So Ken explains, good point. Maybe you can eat 5 on a shish kebab. But they are like the caribou fat. What's happening to the bird tells what's happening in the ecosystem. That's why Ken was there. He wanted to see what the health was of the birds, how they're nesting, how they're behaving, doing his study. Whatever birders do, that's what he went there to do. So that's what a lot of this is. So frequent groups, amazing resource and environmental management by Bruce Mitchell. Some of you may have seen this as required reading in some of the courses. Actually, maybe not. It's a little bit older, but it's those practices of what we do in NRES. How many worlds are there? Paul Majesty, amazing. It's in his article that he says in the book of Genesis, there's light on first day, but sun isn't until day 4. That's that article. And in this article, he's asking this question, how many worlds are there? Because there are so many creation stories. How could we have this creation story? How can we have that creation story? How can we have that creation story? And in the end, he says it's like a medical condition. When one of us has a medical condition, and if we are unlucky enough to succumb to that medical condition, we will interact with, or there will be some interaction medically with us, with different types of doctors. And so Majesty says it's like a medical condition. When you first bring it to the doctor, you'll have that first consultation with your GP. Then you'll get referred to a specialist, second encounter, second perspective. And then that may go into another specialty. So how many worlds are there then says there are so many perspectives. And what he says is, don't discount any. There's wisdom in all of them. There's knowledge in all of them. Does anybody know the Latin word for knowledge? No?
I think he said it in the class.
I did.
He said science.
Yes. The Latin word for knowledge is science. We are all academics, we are all scientists. The Latin word for knowledge is science. I'm not saying it right, I don't know how to say it, pronounce Latin. I'm sure we could Google it. But that knowledge, he says, is in all of those perspectives, in all of those stories. Interesting, yes, helpful, yes. So, and then other articles, so the ones that I have so far for the PhD, in those articles, same thing. There are so many perspectives. Maybe Zara and I have the same supervisor, Annie, and similar articles, I'm sure, but that's what it says is the perspectives are important because of the knowledge in those perspectives. Did our thing expire, Anne?
No.
No, somehow people on Zoom do not see your PowerPoint. So
Oh.
sorry. Sorry for those on Zoom.
So Majesty's, that's his most recent one. There's another recent one that he's working on right now, but that's like 2021, I think that one, or 2022. And Annie, in my first Zoom with her, she said, go chase down Majesty. Okay, that's what I did. So maybe she said the same thing to Zara. If she didn't, Zara, there you go. Yeah, so human dimensions of wildlife management, similar to resource and environmental management for those of us that are students of natural resources. My BSc that Madison so eloquently introduced me at. So my BSc was natural resources at UVic. My Bachelor of Science is in natural resources. So I'm a geography major. I was almost an economics minor, which I didn't know until grad day. Somebody from the registrar's office said, hey, do you know that if you took 2 more courses, you would have an economics minor? Ah, that's okay. In any case, those references are like those textbooks. How am I doing for time? We're good?
Yeah.
So what time do we finish?
11:30.
11:30? Okay, so we're at 11:14 now.
Oh, wow. Time
Are we?
flies.
Yes,
Are we?
yes. It's 11:14, right?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, all right, I better hurry. So anyway, amazing literature, and it's developing and it's growing, and like that one that I mentioned from Majesty about the Bible, that's just Indigenous Knowledge by Paul Silito. There's lots of excellent information there as well about Indigenous history. Dancing Salmon by Deidre Cullen. She was a PhD student. This is her thesis from UVic. And she took stories that were from an old ethnographer, Franz Boas. So for those of you that have taken anthropology, you will have bumped into Franz Boas as a name. And Franz Boas was a German anthropologist and ethnographer. And in the late 1800s, I think it is, or 1800 somewhere, he collected and wrote down or documented, I shouldn't say collected, he documented stories. And so Cullen has spent a lot of time with the Lakota Nation. Lakota is a sub-nation within the Kwakiutl Nation. They are on the central coast of BC. So from the top of Vancouver Island and south towards Vancouver, along that, some in there, that's their territory. In any case, her thesis is her taking those stories back to the elders. She took Franz Boas's ethnographies and took them back to the elders and said, what do these mean? And they got all excited. Oh, I remember that. My mother told me this. In one of them, their first woman is the mother of the people. She is also the mother of the salmon in the history. When she puts her finger in the water, salmon appear. If she walks into a water, schools of salmon appear. That's what the story tells us. That's in Cullen's paper. It's amazing. That's just one. There's another one where there's a couple of elders, well, there's several elders that she interviews in the course of that paper, and one of them says, I don't really like only shooting bull elk. In their territory, when they're hunting, it's bull elk, it's elk. And he said, I don't really get that because it's unbalanced. The young elk don't know how to behave. The young elk don't know how to become old elk. Ooh. So that elder suggests a more balanced approach to hunting. And we see it all around. I even said that my dad is the director of Fish and Wildlife for Nisga'a Systems Government. I said, hey, Dad, check this article out. This is what this elder said. He goes, Because right now, nobody shoots cows. Elk or moose. But that's unbalanced according to this elder. So anyways, that's one of them. Olican past and present is Megan Moody. She's from the New Hawk Nation at Bellacoola. Another amazing documentation of their history. With mine, we have Nisga'a Olican as well. So anyways, thanks, Sam. I better hurry. I only have how many more slides? A bunch. So some of the output and applications for my research and for the presentation, codifying information to improve applications in scientific pedagogy. So as teachers, as instructors, we will all become teachers, Dr. Otter said. We've been only doing mock lectures for the last 3 weeks because we're going to be all teachers at some point. But changes in scientific pedagogy by utilizing this information, augmenting the logical frameworks of positivists and other paradigms to provide pathway to new forms. So I've already mentioned about those perspectives and coming from different perspectives. Changing the question from why to how to hold space for Indigenous knowledge. Not why should we, but how do we hold space for Indigenous knowledge? That's my last slide as well. So thanks, Alex. So these are some of the theories. I won't spend a lot of time because we're quickly running out of time. I don't even have time for questions, but better hurry. So deep ecology, one of the theories, bottom line, diversity as intrinsic value. We can go to the next one. I'll just go through them really quick. Ecofeminism and Indigenous knowledge. You're welcome to. I didn't write this. I don't know. So somebody researched this. Paul Washer, she did, right? Yes. So you're welcome, Paul Washer. The Nisga'a term. This is interesting. The Nisga'a term when addressing the third person. So first person, I, second person, you, third person, he or she usually. Third person in Nisga'a, so the first person in Nisga'a is ni, me. Second person in Nisga'a is ni, you. Third person in Nisga'a is Nick. And it's not gender specific. It means either gender. And so in my class, our language instructor has a chart up on the wall and it has the pronouns, first person, second person, third person in Nisga'a and English so that we can learn them and know them. And so I said to my class, look, we already are gender inclusive. Ooh, right there. And that's what this comes from. Thanks, Hannah. Island biogeography, that was Genevieve, and that's amazing. Islands, just incredible studies, of course. So for those of you that are doing any work with islands, it's amazing. If you haven't yet, check it out. Practices. For us, in our case, we have islands. This is the western side of Nisga'a lands. This is at the salt water. And so several islands, but as well, part of the island biogeography studies those small pockets of places. And so the reference that I made was our houses, who wilt is singular, who wilt is plural for houses. And I said, I come from the house of, each of us comes from the house of. Each of those territories that our houses own are ecosystems of different types. One of our chiefs says, in my territory, there's still 25 feet of snow out there in March. And so that's a very different ecosystem than somebody's who's down here by the edge of the ocean. So Mexico City began as an island. Check that out. That's an amazing story. About Mexico City is the second largest in the world, I think now. Tokyo's number one. I think Mexico is number 2 or 3. So that's an amazing history from the Mayan people. And Turtle Island, the story of Turtle Island, which Turtle Island is not something in my culture or in BC cultures. Turtle Island is part of Indigenous cultures back east. And that's, so the one that I mentioned earlier, the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, that's theirs. That's one of their stories. There's no turtles here. FYI, there's no turtles in your store. They're in a store downtown or at Line Center. So yeah, anyways, thanks, Anne. So resilience theory, one of our theories we talked about, resilience is amazing. in one of the quotes that I wrote down in my book, and I was gonna go through it from totally out of time. My grandfather James, so this is my grandmother's older brother, this is my grandmother's younger brother, was Joe. Her older brother said that millions of Indigenous were killed or died after contact, which is true. The decimation of Indigenous populations declined, there was population decline. The fact that we survived is resilience. The fact that they're Indigenous amongst us, that's resilience, first one, full stop. That's resilience. So then we take that a little bit further and jump into the study more about what resilience is. It's the survival of Indigenous people in the face of colonial policies. This group photo is, third from the left is my great-great-grandfather. His name was John Moore. His father was Scottish, his mother was Nisga'a. He was a head chief of one of the houses. When this photo was taken, I think he was like 20 something. And so this is the group of Nisga'a chiefs that traveled to Victoria asking for a treaty in the 1880s. So this is taken in 1885, I think. So it's late 1880s. And these are the Nisga'a chiefs. And what I didn't say on Friday to my PhD class is, look at how they're dressed. And so, okay, they didn't arrive in Victoria on a plane or even a cruise ship. They arrived in Victoria on canoe. They paddled their way from the Nass to Victoria. Can you imagine? Can we even paddle across a lake? But so, and then they arrived and they're looking like this. So, okay, that's why I put it fine. So, thanks, guys. Next is metabolic theory of ecology and Indigenous knowledge. I talked about the Northern Ontario Cree hunting caribou. So metabolic theory, for those of you that are studying it, that is the explanation that ecological processes are fundamentally metabolic. And so there's energy that is studied in those processes. Two ancient practices that I outlined here were the cultivation of clam beds and salmon-bearing streams. To this day, the members of part of my mom's nation, Kitkatla, they continue to honor the Nisga'a Nation because one of their streams ran out of salmon. And so they explained that to their Nisga'a friends at the time. This is like, I don't know how many hundreds of years ago. It's hundreds of years ago. And to this day, they still acknowledge that the salmon that they have today came from the Nass. Because the knowledge keepers in the Nisga'a Nation at the time said, okay, do this. Take the hearts of salmon, which is what they did. So they took the hearts of salmon and they planted them in the salmon-bearing streams, and the salmon reappeared in Kitkatla territory. So imagine that. So that history still, to this day, the salmon are still there. But in their history, they ran out of salmon. It was the Nisga'a salmon that revived. So that's a practice of ecology, this practice. Next time, thanks. So measurement theory, that was mine. So the creation of a concept of zero, for those of you that have taken math, and for all of us that have taken calculus, it's really fun. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. The creation of zero is a thing. Yes? Does anybody, do people know about the creation? So creation of zero leads us to engineering and all kinds of things. If you Google zero, you'll see all the studies about what zero accomplished. In Mayan history, it develops their architecture, education systems. When the first Spaniards arrived in Mexico City, it was more than 200,000 people big. That's how big that city was. And it was zero waste. One of the articles I read last week, and I mentioned to my class on Friday, it was a zero waste society. There's no landfills. To this day, when they're doing archaeological digs around Mexico City, there's no landfills, none. Because they developed that system for zero waste. Oh, yes, it's amazing. So check it out. I better hurry now, right? And it's quickly one. So Gaia hypothesis is another one. So for those of you that know about Gaia hypothesis, you'll know about this. Stanley did an amazing job on telling us what Gaia hypothesis is. And there's direct correlation of the Gaia hypothesis to Indigenous knowledge, even in the face of the controversy around Gaia hypothesis. What is important is that it's another perspective. It brings another way of looking. Oh, okay. All right. Maybe that tells us more. It does tell us more. That's kind of the point. Find the perspective, find the other knowledge. Find the next knowledge, find the next knowledge, find the next knowledge. That's what this does. Finds more knowledge. Next time, thanks. Feminist political ecology. This is Jemima. Later at 5 o'clock today, Jemima's all over this. But for Indigenous knowledge, Jemima. So you probably heard this. I don't know if you heard this in on the bus in Kelowna on Friday, but this one is important where the challenges to the Indian Act were led by women, First Nations women. So incredible history there. And 2012 Idle No More, also founded by women, not men. Women, not men. And so it's important that we have our policies that then address us accordingly as men and women. Applying Indigenous knowledge, that's the boat that's in the museum. That's my dad's fish boat. I'm in that picture somewhere. But this was from Zoe's TED Talk that she had us watch. This is Albert Wiggin from Australia. That's his explanation about what Indigenous knowledge and science, how they come together. The impacts then, so Indigenous perspectives to provide greater insight to the application of Indigenous histories for expanding environmental planning and resource management. So using or learning and then applying. And above all, practitioners like us, as scientists and academics, should always ask, how do I hold space for Indigenous knowledge? And there's more and more that's happening. In fact, on CBC's app yesterday, there's a story that in the story, the settler scientist says, we have to think like the Indigenous. And so he's saying this, utilizing the expertise, utilizing that information, utilizing that knowledge to make us all better. And that's essentially what that is. So that's it. So references, and then down at the bottom end, so there's 3 references, then the last slide. 2, 3. We have to put all our references. Thank you, Ron and Ken. And then last slide is here. So more information at in our courses, and you can contact Lori. That's her email. And so Doyak Sitnison will pack some also say the same thing again. Thank you all for being here and for all of your good work. It was very fun. Thanks, Anna. It was good.
Thank you so much, Harry. Oh my goodness. It's a real gift to have you here to share your knowledge, because knowledge is a gift, right? One of the gifts. And I'm so incredibly lucky to be in the same class as you. Thank you so much. I hope some of you guys can stay and ask questions if you're available, Harry, for a couple more minutes. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? And that goes to the people on Zoom as well. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I'll let you speak, or you can just put in the chat.
I wanted to just say, it's a comment, not a question. When you were talking about the spiritual explanation of how it's done in Islam, and I saw many similarities with other spiritual beliefs. To be honest, I look for similarities and rather than differences. So there was a lot that I have to relate to the soul and heaven.
Yes.
So thank you for that. There's a connection point, I think, now.
There is.
With this, yeah. Also, when you mentioned about bears and how they were the ones that taught how to eat, I think there was a study in Canada which proved that how bear diet is similar to humans. Yeah, I will search that paper and send it to you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So that you can maybe incorporate.
Yes, thanks. You know, one of the interesting things about that TED Talks was Albert Wiggin. 3,000 years ago, we were all Indigenous. So that's what he says. That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Harry, for a wonderful talk. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for
the
being
second
here.
version.
Yeah. Your questions? Yes,
Yes, Roger.
Roger.
Harry, I'm wondering, I'm interested in the Indigenous creation beliefs. And I'm wondering how many of them were predate European settler contact, and how much have they sort of blended in with the Bible when you talk about the first and the fourth day.
Yes. Yep, so there is a separation. And the ones that are in the volumes were told by my great grandfather. They were told to him by his grandfather. So that goes back, I think my great grandfather was born in the early 1900s. Like right around 1900, so his grandfather would have been at least 40 years, 50 years sooner in the 1800s. And while there are similarities with Christian creation stories, there are those elements that are just so different that, yeah, this can't be the same thing. And so many are like that. Even the one from the Iroquois Confederacy that I mentioned, where the first human is woman, that there are elements in that one. Yeah, there's no connection there as well. So we can see that it is another perspective. Definitely, yes. Thanks, Roger. So I should also mention I met Roger when he and I were way younger and at my mom's house.
Wow.
We've known Roger for a long time because he's been part of the organization.
I had hair back then.
Yes.
Mine was, I can think of the last part. So how can we incorporate this type of knowledge within like, I guess, every day or something, or ecosystem, or just whatever?
Yes, so
How can we like do that?
excellent question. So we were getting our mock lectures together. And two of my colleagues, Paul Washer was one and Hossein was the other, and they emailed me and they said, Hossein is studying sound transfer. He's an engineer and his PhD is in sound transfer in wood buildings. So when you're running on wood, if you've ever been in a building where there's a toddler running above you or below you or beside you. So he's studying that. How do we take care of that? So he said, okay, how does Indigenous knowledge apply here? And I said, well, the first thing is one of the first principles is respect. Another output from respect is peace. And that then addresses acoustics. So there are ways, and Tawash's was about oil cleanup. She is studying nanobubbles. Nanobubbles are those really small bubbles that are really good at cleaning. Just water. It's amazing. She's an engineer too. And so I said for her, same thing. To take care of the environment is to implement those principles so there are applications in many ways. So even when, and my mom was saying she got a question about astronomy. How does Indigenous knowledge apply to astronomy? And she said, and she answered it saying, there are applications. It's a matter of reading. I told my cousin, he said, how's the PhD going? I said, well, the P in PhD stands for reading, the A stands for reading, and the D stands for reading. So, and then I learned from an article in the UK 2 weeks ago, I don't know if I told my colleagues, but in the article, they called the PhD degree the reading degree. I didn't know that. At least that's what, yeah, so I guess that's why we're all reading forever.
Yeah.
It's good though, it's good reading though.
One last question. Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Harry, for everything. And one more round of applause for him.